Nebraska Preps postgame with Damon Benning and Jacob Padilla.
That's right. You heard the big voice guy. It's Nebraska Preps postgame. Not even really postgame. It's more like post days. Or maybe it should be more like Post Malone, because congratulations to us for getting here. right.
Yeah, this is what,
sans all the ink. Like, congratulations for getting here with the weather not really cooperating.
Yeah, well, so we knew Monday wasn't going to happen. We canceled that early.
No.
Tuesday, we were going to try to do it, and then I couldn't get out of my parking lot.
Which was interesting. I'm thinking to myself, did they really just box you in?
Pretty much. They plowed the lot and then came through with snow blowers, cleaned up some other stuff, and put the snow right back in the middle of the lot.
Yeah.
And then never came back.
I was one of those guys. I work off of Dodge, and you can turn left into businesses from Dodge. There was no turning left because basically the snow was pushed to the middle, so it was like a natural snowbound median. So I was like, can I gun it? No. Turned right, got off on 50th, then went back north across the four-way intersection. I'm like, I wouldn't have made it.
Yeah, that studio's not easy to get to coming from the west. Yeah,
it's like you have to intentionally be ready to go there. Otherwise, it helps when you get there, too, at 5:20 because it's very limited traffic. But, man, it's like flip a coin. Get there the best way you can. So, anyway, the Nebraska Preps post-game and Post Malone because, of course, congratulations to us for being here. So how you been, man? It's with the rescheduled games, we've had 2 days worth of rescheduled games now. Are we happy about that or not so much?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how the schedules play out now. We've got the couple conference tournaments pushed back starting today that were supposed to start on Monday. So we'll see kind of how that runs up against kind of the regular schedule. How I haven't looked ahead to see where teams are planning to be otherwise, but so now you got the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday kind of just playing out, trying to get it in at this point. Hopefully we don't have any other weather that causes other delays. But yeah, we'll see kind of how we've already got a few games playing today, which is a rarity. You don't normally get varsity games on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
So just at this point, you got to fit them in wherever you can to get these games played.
Yeah. Let me ask you real quick before we get into the EMC tournament that you're talking about. Would you rather be a team that is a little younger, has fresh legs, that could play 3 games in 5 days, or would you kind of want to be one of those veteran teams, knowing you could handle the rigor, but may have a little more wear and tear because, listen, I know they're in high school, but there are varying degrees of recuperating and numbers. Like, kind of how do you see who would have an advantage in your opinion?
Well, and with missing out on the practice days as well, not just the games, I think you kind of side with the more experience there because coaches weren't able to be hands-on in person with their teams, kind of run through scouting reports and get them ready for the potential multiple games that they're going to see. So I think, especially with these conference tournaments where everybody knows each other, the teams with more experienced players that have played these other teams year in and year out, I think are a little bit more prepared. And unless you got some teams that are kind of playing guys that have guys that are kind of playing hurt and trying to get through that stuff, then I think you just side with the experience there, and their legs should be fine.
Of the EMC tourney, is there anybody that you're really interested in seeing, trying to get a little bit of a feel for what's going on?
Yeah, the semis for that, if the seedings hold, could be pretty darn good. You got Norris against the winner of Bennington-Blair, and we just saw Norris go to Bennington. It was a tight game through 3.5 quarters or so, and then Norris kind of pulled away. So that could be interesting. A rematch within 1 week, less than a week of the previous game.
And I think that pushed Norris to 8-2, right, or 8-1. But that's a team we talked about last week where you're like, gosh, their length and athleticism is a little bit different. We were trying to figure out how we unbunch 2 through 6 in Class B. We felt Elkhorn Mount Michael was declared number 1. They have a little bit of their health issues. Yeah. That could maybe change that dynamics. Was there anything that happened last week that changes your mind on what we tentatively talked about with the bulk of that 2 through 6 ranking in Class B?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's all kind of the same thing where Norris is looking pretty strong with Trey DeVoe kind of leading the way there. Brayson Mueller's kind of been a breakout player in Class B this year for them. CJ Hood, Nebraska baseball commit, who's terrific multi-sport athlete.
Keeps it in the family.
So they've got some good players, some length, some athleticism there. So that'll be tough for a lot of teams to match up with. So I think they're definitely kind of in that top tier in B. But as we've seen, it's kind of there is no clear cut, especially with the injury issues you mentioned with Mount Michael now. And I saw them take down Roncalli fairly easily.
I saw him against Elkhorn in the Grudger.
Fairly easily in the River Cities Conference Final. I think Roncalli gave everything they had in the semis to knock off Scott and just didn't really have much left for the final. But even playing without their leading scorer in Caleb Brink, Mount Michael kind of took care of business there. That experienced backcourt stepped up and outscored Roncalli by themselves, Iron Lopez, Brad Bennett, and Joe Schunard. So they still got plenty of talent. We'll see kind of.
Their depth takes a huge hit, especially along that front line. So we'll see how they can adjust. Because they're not a big basketball team to begin with.
Yeah, he doesn't go too deep. That's kind of you got, 2 guys that typically play off the bench, 2-3 guys. And now one of them, Kuhn sliding into the starting lineup in place of Brink on Saturday. He did a good job defensively, but doesn't bring the same things that Brink does because Brink's one of the best players in Class B.
So from an upside standpoint, because I think we kind of know what we're going to get with Platteview. I also think we kind of know what we're going to get with Norris. So let's talk room to grow in that next tier that's kind of bunched up. Who do you feel still has a lot left in the tank that maybe we haven't seen kind of the full gamut?
So one team that I'm starting to get more and more impressed by is Waverly. I got to see them for the first time last week at Wahoo. Came back from down 15 points.
Savvy bunch.
Yeah,
savvy bunch.
And came back in the midway through the third quarter, down 15 against that 1-3-1 zone, making up that many points in that amount of time against the zone, especially one as long and active as Wahoo's. That's not easy. And they made some big plays down the stretch. I think Wahoo just kind of ran out of gas, and Waverly just didn't stop, just kept going. There was one, I think they had 4 or 5 offensive rebounds on one possession with some missed free throws, and ended up
later in that game,
4-point possession there that ended up being huge. And then they followed that up by going to Platteview and winning that game, pulling out a tight one there. So now they're the 2 seed in the EMC, and if Elkhorn takes down Elkhorn North, that'll be a 2-3 matchup there, and that'll be a really good game as well to kind of establish, all right, who kind of that next person, that next team in that top group there with the Mount Michaels and Norris, a couple others.
And your opinion, especially as experienced as they are, is Elkhorn the team that you could probably learn the most about in terms of changing the pecking order? Are you waiting for them to confirm what we already thought about them coming in? Because that's kind of how I look at that Elkhorn bunch.
Yeah, because
I think I know what I'm getting.
Yeah, they've had some interesting results recently, and I haven't seen them since earlier in the season. So we'll see if, I think Thursday, that could be one of the places I go now.
That would be in the quarters, right?
That would be in the semis. So
okay, yeah, Thursday
semis.
I keep forgetting we're not on a normal day. We're Wednesday, and it got pushed back.
Yeah, so that could be where I end up going now at this point. Who knows on Thursday? I have no idea what games are being played when anymore. But that I think we could learn, all right, is Elkhorn still kind of what we thought they were? 'Cause again, they've couple losses, couple of close results, some good wins by Waverly. You kind of felt like it was Elkhorn up here in this group, and then Waverly was in that next tier. And now they've earned the higher seed, and they'll be the top, the home team in that game. So
are you a big believer in winning cultures transcending sports? Now, both the teams we're talking about have a couple of football guys, but have had a lot of success on the gridiron. Do you think the winning culture carries over across sports as we look at a team like Scott or Norris or Elkhorn?
I think it can, and especially with some of those key players being the guys that drive the success in one sport coming over and being a big part of it in the other. Like Cole Murray, he was one of the best players on the floor in that Wahoo game. He had 25, hit some threes to really kind of take advantage of that zone, made some big steals, some assists. He had a huge game, and he's kind of the guy that took over at quarterback and spurred.
Been there, done that, right?
Spurred that football run.
He's been there, done that kind of guy.
So, yeah, as long as you've got the kind of coaching to allow that stuff to kind of shine through, you got a good coach over there with Ryan Reeder. It does pay to have those guys that have had success in other sports to come in and kind of be one of your leaders.
Now, let me ask it the other way, because we both are big fans of a guy like Connor Milliken. Is Platteview too predictable, in your opinion, to be able to change your mind? Or would you think, hey, listen, it's going to take a superhuman effort and some scoring prowess from Milliken and try to get by with a little help from his friends? Like, how do you kind of view Platteview?
Yeah, so Tyler Riley's a senior, but two of their other three leading scorers are sophomores. So they've got some time here to kind of keep building up. It's hard. You don't necessarily feel great about young teams going into the stretch run and the postseason and all that. But, I mean, that is a pretty good 1-2 punch with Milliken and Riley as well. And, again, he's a senior, so this is kind of his last run at it. You kind of worry a little bit about their depth and being able to make it all the way to the postseason and still being strong, having good legs and all that. And, again, anytime you rely on 2-3 players for the majority of your scoring, you run into the wrong matchup with the team that really has great defenders that match up well with your best players. That could be tough. But I've been really impressed with Platteview. I did not expect them to be in that group this year. They had a couple of guys, like I knew they were going to be an interesting team with Milliken and Riley. I didn't know what they had coming back beyond that. Might be one of Coach Brodsky's and that staff. Might be one of his better jobs. Oh, yeah. And especially the development for Milliken. Like, he put up some big numbers last year, but it's an every game thing. And that's happening. He's been relatively efficient. And that's happening with everybody knowing that, all right, Milliken is going to take half their shots. He's going to score a bunch of their points and create a bunch of their opportunities. Teams are game planning to stop him, and he's still putting up these numbers game in and game out. All right, so we'll jump over to A here in a second, but for B, are we on the same page where you will take experience and kind of savvy versus potential and growth as the season progresses? Yeah, especially this year, just kind of with the makeup of a lot of those teams in that group and the fact that there aren't any teams that are so beyond talented or beyond the others in terms of talent. It's a lot of really solid, experienced groups. So that's kind of what you're going to fall back on, I think, once we get to March. So let me jump over to A, because I think it's similar, right? You have young talent. That would be a West Side. That would be a Lincoln Southwest. That would be who else in that kind of bunch? Even Central is more experienced, right? With Davis and Marshall and Germany and Denham Johnson. Those are older guys. Bellevue, very mature. Although Bellevue West has some key cogs that has some youth, but they're experienced. Yeah. So they're a little tricky, because if they're going to ultimately defend the title and take the next 2 out of potentially 3 from Millard North, they can't do it with just Frankie Fiddler and Chucky Hepburn. It's going to have to be, in my opinion, an underclassman. So let me ask you the question again. Are you taking the savvy, been there, done that experience, or are you going to take a little youthful exuberance to complement some savvy experience? Yeah, that's a tough one. That's we get round 2 coming up this week on Friday. We'll get to it. But that's a tough one. I think like you mentioned, a lot of that youth is experience. So because of what they went through last year, and Josiah Dotzler making some of the biggest plays of the game in that state title game. That's a kid as a freshman growing up before our eyes in the state tournament after he had some moments throughout the season, but he was kind of just another guy there, stepping up in that moment, hitting those huge shots, and he's carried that over this season where he's been pretty darn good most of the year, shooting the ball at a really high rate, and you've got some of those bench guys kind of coming along. So and then Stuvie hit a couple shots last game. Evan Inselman's been solid this year, who's not necessarily an underclassman. He's a junior, so he's been around a couple years, but he didn't play a ton last year. And now he's kind of emerged as their sixth man, and he's been solid there for everything he's doing for them. So,
it's interesting because you look at a team like Millard North, you can kind of pencil in what's going to happen. I think you know what you're getting from Saint. I think you know what you're getting from Hunter. Now he's capable of exploding, but I think generally speaking, the baseline is pretty consistent. It's interesting because when you look at the next biggest threat, it's Bellevue West. I'm not as sure I'm not so as sure of their 3, 4, and 5 fifth options as I am of Millard North. But I still think Bellevue West has the potential to be a better team. Millard North has the better players. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And just the way that Bellevue West team plays and the way that Chucky Hepburn's been playing, where he has kind of morphed into the total playmaker. He's getting everybody involved. Whereas with Millard North, Jane Johnson's a solid point guard. He makes the right plays. St. Thomas is a really good passer. He can create for others as well. But a lot of time it's Hunter, go get yours. Saint, all right, you post up here, go get a bucket. It's kind of a lot of more individual efforts, and then the big guys go get it on the offensive glass or roll to the rim and it'll catch you on a lob. Whereas Bellevue West, with the way Chucky Hepburn is playing right now, they're keeping everybody involved on every possession. You never know who's going to score. He'll get you lose anybody, any of the other four, he's going to find him and he's going to make you pay. So I kind of see what you're talking about there in terms of the way that they're playing right now, especially now that they're kind of back to full strength with everybody back in that lineup.
Yeah, it was asked of me last week what I could foresee happening. I begrudgingly gave the advantage to Millard North, but primarily because Bellevue West would have to win 2 in a row. Yeah. Right? I mean, Millard North had already had 1 in the can from Metros. I didn't love it, but I think for them to lose 2 straight to the same team, that's just a little more daunting than to be able to split, especially if they don't get this one, right? Because then what could potentially happen at State, because I still think they'll be on opposite halves of the ledger, that gets interesting in a hurry.
Yeah, so we're going to learn a lot here about Bellevue West. Are they really on the same tier as Millard North? If this is even if they don't win, if it's another close game right down, somebody makes a play to win it at the end, then that'll firmly establish. Versus last time, they both threw their best shot at each other. We saw what they both had and went down the wire. Now both schools, both coaching staffs, they've got that tape. They saw what matchups went each way. And now they're going to come back and make some adjustments. So let's see here, with those adjustments, which team's talent, which team's ability can shine through and can make the adjustments better and hopefully get an advantage over what they saw from last game.
I think I've seen enough now to have a little conviction for 3, 4, 5, right? Like and as I say, I think I would take Prep, then Pius, then Central. Thoughts?
Yeah, that's definitely the next 3.
In some order.
Yeah, and I think you do take Prep at 3 at this point. Pius versus Central. That's really
an interesting
one because I saw Pius against Bellevue West. I saw Central against Millard North.
Who do you feel like you know more about?
Definitely Central, especially because I've seen a lot more of those guys just through the summer ball, through the years. I know all those guys that are playing. For them.
I feel like I could peg how Pius is going to play better than I can Central.
I think Pius. I think they've got more volatility in terms of they've got some guys that can make some plays, but that can also kind of disappear, struggle at times.
Because we're thinking that third quarter against Bellevue West, right? I think they panicked a little bit, feeling like they had to keep up.
Yeah. So in a couple of those guys that I think I feel a little bit more confident about what I'm going to get from a couple of those Central guys than I do a couple of those Pius guys, because some of those guys, they're newer to the varsity, the main rotation. They're new starters. You've got the Hoiberg twins back from last year that were a big part of what they did, and then Sam Hostreiter played off the bench. But guys like Brady Christensen and Jack Hastreiter. Like those guys are kind of newer to playing big roles at the varsity level. So I'm still kind of learning about what those guys are going to give them every game.
And a name you didn't say, but is interesting because he's kind of the unicorn of all the teams that we talked about because he's more of a traditional big. Dabercow, right? You gain a little on offense, but defensively, a lot of teams put him in two-man games and they pull him away from the basket. But he also makes Pius pretty interesting because of his potential offensive efficiency.
And that's where Coach Spitzka makes his money there is you got to figure out the best way to use him where you get the advantage out there without giving up as much depending on what the other team's rolling out there, what schemes.
Kind of like how Seton Hall has to, what they have to figure out what they have to do with Mama Kashvili, right?
Yep.
Like
exactly.
He helps you offensively, but how much – I mean, Creighton could take advantage of him seemingly Wednesday tonight just to see. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's always interesting, that cat-and-mouse matchup. But I feel like their consistency, and they were impressive going to Kearney winning the way that they did. That is not an easy place to play. And I think Coach Moronic does a fantastic job.
Big fan.
You know, I mean, he's really good.
Yeah, no doubt.
And that was an that got my attention.
Yeah.
Because I wanted some confirmation bias, for lack of a better term, because I think Pius is pretty good.
And interesting game coming up tonight that was pushed back, Scott and Pius.
Yeah.
And Scott coming
off
off
that. I don't know if Scott has enough offensive versatility.
That's exactly it. Scott coming off that kind of upset loss to Roncalli after smacking them by 40 the previous game. You know that they're going to be fired up coming out of this game. We'll see kind of what ways they can push Pius because they've got a pretty tough 1-2 combo there with Charlie Fletcher and Luke Scars. And they're going to Scars strong enough to kind of challenge those guys inside.
Carrying on the family tradition.
Yeah. And so they've got some firepower there. Pius, I think, definitely favored in that game, and they've just got more because Scott is still kind of figuring out the rest of the rotation. But that's an interesting one, especially kind of a midweek here that got pushed that I think kind of float under the radar there. We can learn a little bit more about where Scott is at this point, I think, as part of that B mix that we were talking about earlier.
So it's like you're scrolling through and we're looking at stats and we're going to games, and lo and behold, we've talked about this 8, 9, 10, West Side and Papillion, and all of a sudden Papillion La Vista South is struggling a little bit. But who reemerges back in the top 10 sitting snug at 10-3? Millard West is interesting. I feel like we got to wait, and we'll talk to Coach on Friday. I feel like we kind of got away from them for a second, but now all of a sudden they found a way to pull me back in with a couple of good wins.
Yeah, and again, that's the way the schedule works out. We've seen some teams kind of hit kind of a bit of a slide here. You mentioned Papio South, who lost that rivalry game to Papio last week.
First time in, 4 years? I think Papio South had won 3 straight.
Yeah, so it was a close game, and then Papio just hit him with a run down the stretch and pulled away.
What has happened to Denaire?
I don't know. They're having a tough time getting him going. And it might be kind of going back to some of the same things we talked about where teams know he's their main guy, and without kind of the on-ball creation, like Daniel Brocail has been having to.
Hey, there was a stretch against Papillion where he was on fire, and kind of in a strange fashion, he goes to the bench and then didn't get it back. That was odd.
I think he scored like 8 or 10 of their first quarter points by himself. And I know he had like a 27-point game last week as well. They came back and survived against Gretna. That was a close one. So he's kind of taken more of the on-ball creation over, but that's still kind of, you need a little bit more there. And so I think it's tough for Papio South to put Denaire in positions to really use his strengths well at this point.
So how are you capping Millard West at this point? Kind of still, I don't even think they're looking really for a signature win, but I do think they're looking for validation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, although I think at this point they have established themselves as that back end of the top 10. They haven't quite struggled as much as some of the other teams that we were maybe higher on coming into the season. So they've kind of established themselves as they're going to be that tough out every night. They're going to be in that mix, that second half of that top 10. They're going to have a chance to earn a good seed going into districts and all that. So I think that signature win would be kind of the next step for them, because I think we know where they are. Can they be more than that? That's what we don't know at this point.
Yeah, they've got 2 coming up. They got Millard South on Friday, and then I think they have Lincoln East. And it's weird. You kind of almost scratch your head. You want to give Omaha North some credit for the win. That was their last loss, because since then they've beaten Grand Island, Gretna, and Burke. Now, I know you're not thinking, okay, wow, but you held Burke to – they scored in the 40s.
Yeah.
Grand Island had 26. They're capable of making you look really bad offensively.
And the 2 games this week, those are they take care of business in those games. That's how they stay in there. You don't have a slip up against that Omaha North from a couple weeks ago. That's kind of, if they can avoid any more of those, they'll position themselves really well.
Which is interesting, because their only other 2 losses are to the number 2 and number 3 teams in the state, Bellevue West and Creighton Prep.
Yep. So that's kind of.
We'll talk to Coach Morrissey. He's going to be interesting, right? Like, because he's never too high, he's never too low. He's going to kind of shoot you straight. And weird. That's pretty much how their team plays.
Should shout out Ryan Larson here, setting a school record, 8 3-pointers, 8 of 10, 33 points. I saw that kid play a lot this summer. He can really catch fire. And I think that'll be the difference for them. If they can get him going as we head into the last stretch of the season here, they're a little bit different team offensively. We know what they can do defensively and controlling the pace. If he's on, in addition to Dom Hum and Evan Meyersick working inside and James Conway doing what he does, then they're a little bit more dangerous team, because you have that little bit more explosive offensive ability with a guy like that.
Yeah, it's subtle, but their physicality along the front line takes a toll on teams, I think. I mean, they really made it ugly for Prep earlier in the season, and Prep is long along that front line, but they made it uncomfortable for Jungers. They made it uncomfortable for Rollins. I mean, you're keeping Prep to the low 40s in that one, and it's like, well, how'd that happen? Well, I mean, they have body types. They're one of the few teams that has body types that can kind of match that front line.
Yeah, and they got a lot of football kids on that team. And again, a guy like Conway, that he's undersized as a big, but he knows how to get it done. He knows how to be physical and kind of play his game.
Yeah, an unbelievable football player.
Yes,
like
very much so.
I pretty much sing his praises. So let's close with this. We'll preview it. Millard North, Bellevue West. Bellevue West should be highly, highly motivated. I think it's weird. Both teams felt like they let it get to where it got in terms of double overtime. I don't know who shares more culpability, but both teams were not happy with periods of how they played down the stretch. How do you look at it?
Well, I don't think we're going to get 48 points out of St. Thomas in this round.
Although big game. Don't count him out.
Very, very true.
I don't think he goes 7 of 13 again, but it would not shock me if he did.
Yeah. So in that, even if he goes for 25-30, I think Bellevue West likes. I think they like a lot of what they got in that game, and it was just Millard North in the end. Talent went out. They just couldn't do anything with Saint and a couple of those guys down the stretch. Unfortunately, I will not be able to get to watch this one live. Hopefully, the live stream will go on YouTube. I can go back and watch it or something, because I've got Husker volleyball duties this weekend. But
not a bad team to be covering, though.
Yeah, no, that's I'm never going to going to complain about that.
And there won't be any dull ones in the Big Ten. That schedule is tough.
Glad to have it back, but man, Bellevue West go from that on Friday to playing Creighton Prep on Saturday.
I think that's the team in the top 10 that has the most to gain. They can send a message, maybe not clear cut, because they will have split with Millard North, but they can send a message that we are the defending state champs.
On the other hand, Prep's got a chance to kind of, if they can take advantage of that second of a back-to-back, because obviously Prep's going to be, or the Prep for Bellevue West, they got to focus on Millard North first. So you're going to have a quick turnaround going from Friday to Saturday. You know they're going to get beat down in that game. So both mentally and physically, that's going to be a tough turnaround for Bellevue West. So if Prep can kind of take advantage to steal a win there, now suddenly it's not a 1-2 and then it's a 3-4-5. It's a 1-2-3. And Prep kind of takes their claim there.
And you're right. Good call. Prep has a ton to gain, too, because they showed me something, and how they crushed Westside last Friday. Their guards got downhill. If you think Prep is just a team that sits around behind the arc and shoots threes with the occasional dump downs to Rollins, that wasn't it. O'Malley found ways to get to the basket. I think Buckley started to really put it on the floor and show some of his versatility. Justin City going at some smaller guards. You could tell it was a conscious effort to play matchups. They really went at some guys that they felt like they had a better advantage of physically and got downhill against Westside.
And that's what makes Prep good. You got 5 guys along that lineup. Anybody can kind of take advantage of the matchup that they're given.
Yeah, which is interesting, right? That's a really good point because at no point did any one guy take over that game. It was kind of systemic. Westside couldn't take care of the ball, and whoever had the matchup was the guy that scored in spurts. For stretches, it was City. For stretches, it was Buckley, who had a tough 11. Then O'Malley, who, if anybody can get under the skin of the rest of the players in the Metro, it's got to be him.
Yeah, he's up there.
There's just no love lost. I mean, he just the way that he can work his opponents into a frenzy.
And then he's also a pretty good scorer as well on top of that. So it's nice bringing that off your bench.
Yeah, he went on a personal 6-0 run the other night, and he
can do that.
He let Westside know about it. Fantastic recap. Go ahead.
Yeah, before we close out, just John Mitchell, we've mentioned before, sophomore at Creighton, 53 points last week. He outscored Elkhorn Valley by himself 53-48. That's I think second time in the last couple of weeks he might have outscored the other team by himself. He's putting up some monster numbers this year, and obviously kind of that level. I've seen him play in person. I think he definitely wouldn't be doing this in the Metro, but at the same time, 40, 43, 47,
Listen,
53.
He can only control who he plays against.
He is putting points up in a hurry.
You're not getting this anywhere else. Make sure you stay tuned. Join us next week. It's Nebraska Prep's post game. That's the man, the myth, the legend, Jacob Padilla. I'm the guy they call ODB, Damon Benning. We'll be back next week. We'll have plenty of quality games to recap. I think Mother Nature will slow her roll. Back next week, Nebraska Prep's post game.
A Hurrdat Media Production.